Hello Varlets. As you can see, I am in the Psykinium on my Psyker because the latest patch drop has brought about some changes. Good changes in fact. The first is that they have increased Soulblaze damage versus flag armor to 150%. This is a 50 percentage point increase from the last nerf, which dropped it down from 200 to 100%. And they've managed to do this because they have somehow unspaghettified their Burning Dot with Soulblaze Dot. So now Burning Dot from Fire, like the Flamer, is a separate armor class as compared to Soulblaze. The second change, and this is completely unexpected, is that they have also buffed Wrack Ruin. They've increased the number of Soulblaze stacks it applies from 3 to 4. And through my testing, I think I've discovered some interesting things. Right, first off, the first thing we want to know is, does the change in Soulblaze damage against flag armor do anything significant? Specifically, does it change how many stacks of warp charges we need to kill meaningful things? Basically, to kill scab shooters at the very least. For those of you who didn't watch my last Soulblaze, or rather Ascendant Blaze nerf, the change to Global Dot, which reduced burning damage to flag armor from 200% down to 100%, made it so that Ascendant Blaze required 6 stacks of warp charges to kill things, which means you had to take warp battery if you wanted your Ascendant Blaze to kill scab shooters. Now, with this change, we still need to take warp battery because 4 stacks unfortunately still doesn't do anything, but the threshold to kill scab shooters is now 5. And so, at 5 stacks without any damage buffs or anything, with my open hands, we deal enough damage to take out flag shooters now, which is 1 stack of warp charges less than what we needed before. Voila. But it's still not enough to take out scab stalkers, and it's definitely not enough to take out melee man scab bruisers. That's right, I keep forgetting the name of them. Of course, if we apply the Soulblaze trick where it inherits any damage buffs and perks on your equipped weapon, so my void stuff here has got 25% damage against flag, it will increase the outgoing Soulblaze damage and pushes up to a new breakpoint. So with 5 stacks and plus 25% damage against flag, we now deal 6 points more of damage against scab, which should be enough to kill scab stalkers on top of killing the regular shooters. There we go. Not enough, just under to kill a bruiser, and unarmored remains untouched. These enemies still require 6 stacks. So, what does this all mean? Does this slight buff or change to Soulblaze improve anything? Well, as you saw, it reduced the number of warp charges we needed for Ascendant Blaze to kill things. It dropped from 6 minimum to now 5 minimum. It is a buff, no doubt about it, but in isolation, it still forces you to take warp battery because you must hit that 5 stack threshold now, and you can't do that without warp battery. And if we just look at things from individual change by individual change, it's not too much of a buff. It is a buff for the Purgator stuff because it's dealing now more damage to flag armor than it did before. But when it comes to Ascendant Blaze, which is my point of testing here, it's an okay buff. Doesn't really change too much. That is until we start looking at Wrack Ruin. Wrack Ruin's main change was simply increasing the number of stacks of Soulblaze from 3 to 4. And previously, Wrack Ruin at 3 stacks couldn't kill anything. You needed a minimum of 4, which has now become the minimum of 5. So, if I bring this model here to show you what 2 brain bursts, which is what you needed before to kill things, does now to these enemies. 1, 2. 65 damage per tick. And that kills everything here. Of course, these enemies are out of range, but 65 per tick will wipe out all of these enemies here on Damnation. That's good because it is more damage and it kills them more reliably. But compared to where it was at 6 stacks, it would have done the same thing. Because the threshold for killing things has dropped down to 5, what you can do now is, let's say there's a single mauler here, what you can do is now set it on, brain burst it once to set everything here on fire and immediately cast Ascendant Blaze. That puts you at 5 stacks without having to gather any warp charges to take out scab shooters. And of course, if scab stalkers happen to be in the mix, just taking out your weapon with flag damage will kill them as well. That's really good, because now it makes Ascendant Blaze useful even without warp charges. Because now enemies hit by Wrack Ruin primes all of these enemies with 4 stacks, which means all they need is at least 1 stack to kill that, 1 stack with your flag damage perk up to kill this, and 2 warp charges for Ascendant Blaze to kill everything else. That opens up build crafting for Psykers again, which is good, because now you don't have to take warp battery anymore. If you tactically or strategically use Wrack Ruin on elites and then follow up with Ascendant Blaze, igniting all of the Wrack Ruined enemies before, you can still kill them just as effectively as if you had 5 or 6 warp charges without actually having to get the warp charges. Of course, getting 2 is a lot more easier than having to get 6 to take out unarmored enemies. And of course, it is dependent on having an elite nearby to prime everything else. But that doesn't change the fact that we have a more interesting gameplay loop that is possible now. This change to Wrack Ruin has also increased the value of Wildfire. And of course, part of this increase in value is definitely from the increase to Soulblaze damage against flag armor. And the reason for that is in this demonstration here, which I will try not to fudge up because I keep messing this up when I'm trying to explain and do it at the same time. So what is going to happen is, say this Mauler is part of a patrol, and in this patrol we have a bunch of ads here. If you brain burst the Mauler twice, you kill it and set these enemies within 4 meters of it on Soulblaze. Each of them will have 8 stacks. Because the threshold for Wildfire is only spreading 4 stacks, this enemy, which would have 8 stacks on it, can spread 4 stacks to a maximum of 2 other enemies. And because those enemies are now primed with 4 stacks, casting an empty Ascendant Blaze can potentially just kill them outright, even though they weren't hit with the initial Wrack Ruin from before. I will try to demonstrate this. So what it should work is, this dies from 2 brain bursts, all this dies from 8 stacks. The rest of these get set on fire with 4 stacks each, and they will die from the Ascendant Blaze casted on them. Hopefully this works. Yeah, so that... Okay, at least the Scab Stalker dies. Yeah, so that kind of works as proof of concept. I mean, he stumbled out of it, and is he gonna die? Oh yeah, he died because Wildfire is now spreading 4 stacks all over the place, and he's gonna die too, is he? No, almost. But yeah, you see that proof of concept here. If you kill one, you prime everything else around it to be killed by an empty, a 0 warp charge Ascendant Blaze, which you couldn't do before. I would argue, in some sense, that this change actually makes Ascendant Blaze based builds more interesting to play with, because of what you can now do and how useful Wrack Ruin is compared to it was before, because of changing from 3 stacks to 4 stacks, along with the increase to Soulblaze damage, unlocks another dimension of gameplay, tactics, strategies you can use with Psykers now. And that's part of the reason why I love Psykers a lot, because of this kind of little mechanics you can toy around with. So hopefully that explanation made sense. I'm literally recording this right after work, as soon as immediately after the patch dropped. So my explanation might be a little bit wonky, but if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the comments and I will do my best to respond. Well, that's it for this video. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Varlets.